This is the GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 304, entitled "She's Just Another Monoconscious Feminazi." Description. This flyer describes the attitudes of most women today towards hearing the term masculism for the first time. It's usually hostile and instinctively fearful. The masculists aim to remove the monoconsciousness of women by making them biconscious, that is, equally aware how women can oppress men, as vice versa. Those women who remain monoconscious feminazis, and hence feminist bitchy, will not get a man. The link itself. Make it a bit bigger. She's just another monoconscious feminazi. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. After 3.5 months living in Australia, where I migrated to late August of 2018, I'm starting to see patterns in women's attitudes towards masculism. I live alone, but would like to have some female companionship, so I've chosen to twef, that is, have a relationship with a FIP, that's financially independent person, woman, who has her own apartment. Twef equals 2A2F equals 2 apartments, 2 FIPs. So that if when the relationship goes sour, the two just walk away back to their own apartments at zero cost to the man. I've written several flyers on the topic of twefing, which is the obvious way for a man to get companionship and sex from a woman without paying the traditional price of being a manslave to a fluffy parasite female. To find such a twefing woman who is not also a real feminazi, that is, with a feminist indoctrinated attitude that gender oppression of one sex by the other is a one-way street, that is, by men against women. It's not easy, because nearly all the monocultured Australian females are what I call monoconscious feminazis, nearly all of them. So each time I come across this attitude, I say to myself, oh my God, another one, another monoconscious feminazi. These monoconscious feminazis are the way they are because they are monoconscious, that is, by definition, they've had their feminist consciousness raised, that is, they've been educated by feminist ideas that men oppress women, and they are often well informed on how men do that, but they know nothing about masculism because they've never heard of it. Certainly not in the media, because the masculist media breakthrough hasn't happened yet. So, being monoconscious, not surprisingly, these women are angry at men because they've learned how men oppress women. This anger makes them rather feminazi bitchy and not nice to be with. It also makes them hostile when they come across masculist thinking for the first time. They tend to be strongly offended and utterly refuse to consider a man who is a masculist as a potential date on an e-dating site, as I'm learning is the case. This has happened to me so regularly now that I expect it. So as not to waste time and mental energy on a woman who contacts me on an e-dating site, I give them the masculist test. That is, I'm very upfront with them, saying to them that, quote, if you can't stomach my masculist views, then bye, end quote. The usual reaction after they watch a few of my masculist videos is that they don't reply at all, or if they do, it's usually with a rather hefty FU, expressing their outrage that a man could intellectually, ideologically attack women. This to me is utter hypocrisy, of course, because they seem to be unaware that their attitude is that it's okay for a woman, a feminist, to be hostile to men who, in her view, gender oppress women, but it's not okay for a man, a masculist, to be hostile to women who, in his view, gender oppress men. Such hypocritical women I label monoconscious feminazis because they are repulsive to be with, utterly obnoxious and misandrist, and since they are profound hypocrites, they are contemptible. But such women, particularly the monocultured Australian women, are nearly all like this. Their culture has taught them feminism and not yet taught them masculism, so they are gender biased, anger biased, monoconscious, and this makes them repulsive to masculists. Such women who are intolerant and indifferent to the gender plight of males, especially towards the quarter of fathers who are financially massacred and have their lives ruined in the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts, are seen to be callous hypocrites to masculists, who of course choose to have nothing to do with such women. It's likely within a decade that most men will have been infected with the masculist virus, now that that virus has been hatched and is now starting to infect whole populations, millions, later billions of people. These monoconscious feminazis will be forced to accept the fact that if they ever hope to attract the interest of a man, these women will need to become a lot more sympathetic towards masculist ideas, or they will pay a heavy price. That is, they will not get a man. Masculist men find such women repulsive and want nothing to do with them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and as masculist ideas spread throughout the culture, spat at for being callous misandrists who deserve not to get a man. But we're not there yet. The above scenario is just that, a future scenario. The media has yet to take up the masculist story in a big way, so the masses are still ignorant of what the masculists have to say and what the masculists want in terms of social attitudes and political and legal changes. So for the time being, I, as a masculist, have to cope with this army of monoconscious feminazis. Each time I come across one, I comment to myself, quote, "She's just another monoconscious feminazi. This country's full of them. They know nothing about masculism and have had their heads filled with feminist dogmas about female intellectual equality with men, etc. They have not yet had their masculist consciousness raised because they have never even heard of the term before. Masculist ideas to such women, which is nearly all women in this country, Australia, is a closed book." End quote. If I say to such a woman, quote, "I'm a masculist," end quote, the usual reaction is an instinctive. The usual reaction is sorry, I need to edit this better. Reaction of fear, threat, discomfort. You can see it in their eyes and their fearful body language. It's usually the first time that they've even heard the label, but due to its obvious equivalence to the term feminist, they can quickly guess that it probably means an ideology that men do to women what feminism, that is women, do to men, that is, are hostile to them. Since women have been dependent on men for their very survival for several million years, it's built into women to be existentially fearful of the idea of being rejected by men. 1,000,000 years ago, a woman who could not attract the attention of a regular meat-providing male risked starvation for herself and her babies. It is this fear reaction I notice in women when they first hear the word masculist. So how long is it going to take for women to stop being monoconscious feminazis? The answer depends on how quickly the masculists, especially masculist leaders, take to get the journalists in the broadcast media to teach the masses about masculist ideas, so that women can become conscious how women oppress men, for example, with female financial parasitism, with female manslavery, with the hypocrisy of the fluffy feminist takeover of the divorce courts, making them indirect genociders, because they have made the divorce courts so toxic for men that 2/3 of young men now in many countries refuse to marry, reject paternity, the huge issue, and spend their money on themselves. That is, they have gone MGTOW, men going their own way, and thus cause the birth rate to crash. That will wipe out whole populations within a mere century. Hence, indirectly, these monoconscious feminazis have become genociders and hence need to be stopped. So, given what I've just said, why aren't I approaching the media journalists with real energy? I do intend to, but I first want to get my book, Masculism, that's the title, Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. That's the end of the title. Finished by Christmas. At the time of writing, early December 2018, I'm still checking thousands of links in this e-textbook to see if they are correct and functional. This will take me till Christmas. In the new year, 2019, I will have a book that the journalists can refer to and to educate themselves with. By sending them the link to this book that is freely downloadable to them and to the world, it's just a question of time before a handful of journalists bite the hook and start spreading masculist ideas. Once the snowball has gathered enough momentum, the journalists, who are usually rather sheepish, will climb onto the bandwagon once they feel that they will not be sticking their necks out, risking being fired by their feminazi-dominated management, who are as monoconscious as the general population. So it will be an uphill battle for the masculists to achieve this snowball breakthrough. Fortunately for the masculists, there are thousands of media outlets, so a numbers game approach can be taken. That is, send out the links to the book to thousands of journalists and wait for some to bite. When they do, send their media products to the same list of journalists used in the first round, so that they think, quote, maybe there's something to this masculism thing because it's starting to attract interest. Maybe I should give it a bit more attention, end quote. Bit by bit, interest should thus increase until some major journalist decides that masculism and the threat of population annihilation is real. So makes a big story, a cover story of the ideology, and spreads the ideas to millions of people. Once that happens, the bandwagon is really rolling, so that the straggling journalists feel that they had better jump on too, or they'll be left in the dust and risk losing their job. That is when the tide turns, and we will see happening to masculism what happened to feminism in the 70s, when the media took up women's issues in a big way. Today, we live with the product of that. In today's world, most women are monoconscious feminazis. It wasn't always like that. The feminists had to work hard to change society from the housewifey role of women in the 60s to the career woman role of women now. It's now the task of the masculists to change society from the fluffy feminist role of women now to the EMO, that's EMO, equal moral obligations, FIP, that's financially independent person, woman, of the hopefully not too distant future. As masculism spreads, more and more men will confront women with their monoconscious attitudes by telling them, quote, "You're just another monoconscious feminazi," end quote, with a sneering tone in his voice, giving the woman confronted the clear impression that this man has no interest in her whatever, and that if she does not change her monoconscious feminazi attitude towards men, in capital letters, she will not get one. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com with a comment. Contains links to 300 YouTube masculist essays/videos. Ciao.